Hello everybody, Dark Skeleton here, and in this video we're going to be reviewing another set of fan-made Hearthstone cards created by my buddy Cold. He asked me to review this grouping kind of in preparation or celebration of Standard Mode and the new card set that's going to be coming out later this spring. And so this set of cards is going to be revolving around a mechanic he came up with called Loot. Hence the dragon right here. So what Loot does is that whenever you have a loot minion on the field and an enemy minion dies while that creature is still around, the loot effect triggers. And I believe this can occur multiple times, so if you're able to do something like a big board clear, you can get a heck of a lot of value out of loot. And hence, loot is supposed to be more of a control style of keyword rather than aggressive keywords like, well, Death Rattle can be aggressive, it can also be very sticky, but you get the idea. Loot is meant more for control decks, at least in theory. So let's go ahead and actually get into some of these cards. Like my previous card reviews, these are being done blind, so I really have no idea what we're going to be looking at, but I do know that he does come up with some pretty cool cards. So let's see what Cold came up with. Okay, Gold Shire Ruffian. It's hilarious that it's like a 10-year-old boy, I gotta say. But let's see. A 1-mana 1/1 taunt. Loot, add a coin to your hand. Now, a 1/1 taunt, that's fine. In terms of power, very low on the scale. You wouldn't play it for that. The loot effect, though, the fact that you're giving add a coin to your hand on a 1-drop is kind of absurd, simply because this guy can get a lot of that effect over and over and over again inside of a single turn, because all you need to do is play this 1-mana Gold Shire Ruffian, something else that clears the board, or already have minions that go ahead and clear the board, and you can get multiple coins off of this, which is kind of crazy actually. This could be a negative mana cost minion. Yes, it does take up a slot in your deck, and I think the limiting factor here is that in order to do one of those crazy board clears, it can't really be churns 1 through 4. You might play this on like churn, say 6 or 7, and then you would get a couple extra coins, maybe being able to bring out an easy or an easy or an early Ysera, like Ysera and Hex at the same time. Would be pretty cool, or just Ysera on churn 7. I mean, when you put it into that kind of perspective, he might not be completely overpowered, given it takes a deck slot. It's sort of like having Innervate in your deck. And is Innervate super overpowered? It's really good, but this isn't quite Innervate because you can't use it on churn 1 or 2. So, maybe actually more balanced than I was initially thinking. Interesting card. And that was the cover. Let's see, the Hugen Fighter. I'm guessing this is kind of Mists of Pandaria themed. 6 mana, 6/6 Battlecry. Deal 1 damage, I assume, to any target creature. Loot, gain 3 armor. So, you clear some of your opponent's minions off the board. Let's say you have a Death Spite equipped. You're probably going to get that 3 extra armor. The deal 1 damage can be pretty helpful as warrior, because then you don't need to have cards like Whirlwind in your deck. You can just kind of have that 1 extra ping damage outside of Cruel Taskmaster as well. So if this was an actual card in the game, I think it would be pretty solid. Shield Maiden is definitely solid. I think this card is a little bit better than Shield Maiden. You could kind of argue that it doesn't even really need the Battle Cry, because there can be situations where you can get 2 or 3 stacks of that loot. And remember, the Shield Maiden is also only a 5/5, so given that, probably a bit OP. Not massively, but I think this would make it into most, if not all, Control Warrior decks, which does show it's a pretty dang strong card. Next up, Warlocks Crossbow, and this would be a warrior card given that it has the red box for the weapon. 4 mana 2/2, loot, gain +1 durability. So, if you were playing Warlocks Crossbow, what I would immediately think of is this card is really good at bashing things like Knife Juggler, weak minions. However, the thing is, once you're on turn 4, those minions basically need to be kind of dead by then, ideally. You could coin into this on turn 4 and kill a Knife Juggler that was played on turn 2 and already got to hit you once and probably got a couple of Knife Juggler procs. But a 2-attack weapon on turn 4 is actually not that amazing. There's a shaman weapon, the Charged Hammer, I believe, which I'm experimenting a bit in my Control Shaman list. And that's a 2/4 that gives you an amazing hero power as a death rattle, and even that card isn't that great. So I'm not sure this could really see play, given that it's just basically a 2/2 weapon that can become like a Charged Hammer, just without the death rattle effect, and you play Charged Hammer for the death rattle effect. So, honestly, probably inferior to Fiery War Axe and Death Spite. Now, given Death Spite is actually going to be on its way out once Standard hits, so there would need to be a new weapon to kind of fill the void. Would this be it? I don't think so. Probably not good enough. Next up, Shadowy Confidor. Loot. Deal 2 damage to your hero and draw a card. And it's a 3-mana 4/3. So that's kind of interesting. It's like getting life taps without having to pay the mana cost, assuming that your opponent's minions are dying. You could kind of compare this in many ways to the Cult Master. 4-mana 4/2, when your opponent's minions die, draw a card without losing the life. Maybe in Zoo, I could see this. Because A, you don't have to lose a minion. I was wrong about Cult Master, it's when your minions die. And B, it's 1 mana less. So, would this be a little bit better than Cult Master? There's a good chance for that, I think, honestly. And given it also has 1 extra health, I'd say this is probably a reasonably viable card and would definitely see some experimentation. Interesting. It's definitely going to make you lose a lot of HP, and if your opponent's smart, they could, say, kill all of their own minions off in order to find lethal damage. So you kind of have to be careful about that kind of thing. Same with playing cards like the Wrath Guard. Okay, next up. The Savage Grell. 3-mana 6/3, that is a lot of attack. Loot, discard a random card. So when your opponent's minions die, discard a card. That's interesting, because it really encourages your opponent to trade into your minions, which they kind of had to do anyway, because this is a 6-mana minion. Given, I wouldn't be sure about this, but if the loot minion dies at the same time the opponent's minion dies, does this effect not trigger? I would kind of assume that's the idea there. Sort of like if Cult Master dies, Cult Master doesn't proc itself. So, I mean, if you put this as your only minion on the board, though, and it was actually able to get a hit off, that could be quite deadly. Sort of like having, say, a Whirling Zap-O-Matic on the board, but that's just a 2-mana Shaman minion without any drawback, so it's kind of an interesting concept. I don't necessarily know this would get played, unless it was specifically a discard deck. Shoot, what are those cards that are never played? Hand of Jaraxxus. When this is discarded, deal 4 damage to a random enemy. And shoot, the other one, the Dark Ritual or something like that. 6 mana, discard 2 cards, deal destroy 2 random enemy minions. But that doesn't proc when you discard it, I'm pretty sure. So, would you play this in Hand at Jaraxxus? I don't know. You would need more discard synergy cards, and those discard synergy cards would have to be really good, because dumping your hand and emptying it out is really dangerous for typical decks. So not good enough on its own, but if you throw in some extra cards, could be interesting. Nomadic Totems Spreader. 5 mana 5/3. Have there even been 5 mana 5/3s? No, I think that's the only one. There's a 6 mana 5/3, the Kidnapper, but that doesn't really get played because it's terrible. Loot. Give your totems +1/+2. So very similar to the Totemic Kodo guy, who's also a 5-mana minion, kind of filling roughly the same kind of niche. Controlling the board, you make your totems into actual minions, and then because they have to waste resources on totems, they eventually get grinded out. This is a little different though, because it makes your totems also stronger. I think it would have to really be procced twice for it to be good, making a board of a bunch of 2 6s. Maybe you could play those two together, but I mean, how greedy can you really get with one deck? The stat line's kind of bad though. I would hands down take a 5 mana 3/6 over 5 mana 5/3. And because of that, this card's probably too situational to be really good. And the totem deck, to begin with, isn't really played in any serious capacity. So, yeah, interesting card. Probably wouldn't make a deck. Nature Resistance Totem. That is a throwback in WoW. I don't think Nature Resistance Totem has been around for a while. I could be wrong. I used to play a lot of Shaman when I was playing WoW. 2 mana 0/4. Taunt, loot, unlock one of your overloaded mana crystals. Now that's a cool effect. But man, you would really have to have a lot of overload for that to be worth it. I feel like it should be 2 mana crystals at once, because I mean, killing your opponent's minions while you have a conditional card on the field isn't really that easy. I guess you play Nature Resistance Totem and then you Lava Burst something, and you only overloaded for 1, and then you could Lightning Bolt, and then you have a 0/4 on the field, and its mana cost is kind of balanced out. I'm just not really seeing it. Lava Shock is a card that, well, it removes all of your overloaded mana crystals, and that card barely, I think barely made it into viability, and that's just because of aggro Shaman. Being able to get that tempo really helps. But I feel like this is a card you would play in more of a defensive deck, because it does nothing on its own. So, probably too bad to run, honestly. It doesn't do enough for control decks, and it has no stats for an aggro deck, so probably not viable, but interesting. I do like cards that interact with overload. Okay, rogue card. 4 mana, 5/6. Treasonous Assassin. Give your opponent a coin as a loot effect. I think this would be a good card to play. I mean, it's just solid. Your opponent would have to trade their minions into your own minions that isn't the Treasonous Assassin, unless they're going to damage the Treasonous Assassin without killing it. But then if they're trading a minion into it just to get the coin, well, I mean, they're not really trading efficiently. And that's probably what you'd want as the rogue player. So I think this card would be quite fine to play. Coin is arguably less good after about turn 5 or 6. I mean, there aren't too many applications. Maybe you can coin out a Nefarian or any other big drop. But beyond that, unless you're playing a combo deck or Gadget Sand Auctioneer, the coin is kind of iffy. It's alright. Might help a bit. Not the end of the world. So this would be a card I'd definitely play if I was doing something like mid-range or control rogue deck. So I kind of like it. Neurosurgeon tool, and this is presumably a rogue weapon given the black border. 4 mana, 3/2 weapon. Loot, gain +1 attack. So this is effectively a 4 mana fiery war axe that has the potential to gain more attack. Now I guess kind of the idea here is that if you don't attack with it, you can build it up to become a ridiculous Blade Flurry, kind of like what Poison Blade was meant to be, but failed to be utterly, because who would use their hero power over and over again to just give their weapon +1 attack? Is it worth it though? I mean, honestly, I kind of feel like you don't really need more than like a 4 or 5 damage Blade Flurry in 90% of cases. Why not just play, say, and I know this card's going, but why not just play Tinker's Sharp Sword Oil on a dagger and make it a 4 damage weapon immediately, without having any conditional stuff. And they'll probably have another weapon that, once again, well, Tinker's Sharp Sword Oil isn't a weapon, but it's kind of a weapon. There'll probably be more rogue cards that kind of replace it in its niche, or something along those lines. Assassin's Blade's always there. This is only a 2 durability weapon. I feel like for this to be any good, it would have to be at least 3 durability, because otherwise, why not just pay 1 more mana and get an Assassin's Blade? Because you think you're going to kill a bunch of minions while keeping this weapon equipped so that you can do a big Blade Flurry later on? Yeah, I mean, I guess, but nothing really spectacular about it. I mean, Assassin's Blade isn't even good enough to be played in most decks. Okay, neutral minion. Unhallowed Gnome. 1 mana, 1/2. Can't get enough of 1 mana, 1/2s. Funny story, actually. I think the only 1 mana 1/2 that's even played is the Museum Curator, and that's just because it has an amazing battle cry. Okay, loot. Deal 1 damage to each hero. Alright, so in order for loot to work, you kind of have to trade with your opponent's minions, or... yeah, because otherwise they're just going to trade into this minion and kill it off, and the loot's not going to proc anyway. This card is actually terrible. Aggro decks would be irrelevant, they just kill the gnome before they kill your other minions. 1 damage isn't enough. I feel like for this to be, like, worth anything, it would have to be 3 damage to each hero. At least 2. I mean, with 3 damage it could get absurd, because you could, like... well, you couldn't brawl. Maybe you could, well, let's just use Flame Strike as a simple example. You play this, you Flame Strike, it deals 12 damage to both heroes. I still don't think that would be good, because, like, in most cases as the control player, you're probably going to be lower on the HP anyway. Could you put this in an aggro deck if it did 3 damage to both heroes? Maybe. I think it does need to be 3 damage to both heroes for it to be remotely viable. At this point, it's pointless. Just play Leper Gnome. Leper Gnome's way better. 2 mana, 2/3, the Scrollgatherer, a priest minion. Loot, gain +1 health. That is quite solid, honestly. If your opponent doesn't have an answer to remove this, and say all they have is like 2 health minions in the hand because they were playing face something, you kind of denied them the ability to play their minions. Either they don't play their minions, or they play their minions and Scrollgatherer gets free stats. And then against an aggro deck, a 2 mana minion that turns into like a 2/4 or 2/5 is going to be stomping a lot of those little dudes. So this is actually a really good card. I think this would definitely become a staple priest card if it was released. I mean, you gotta be kind of careful about how many good early game cards you do give priest, though, since the late game has always been really good. So if the early, mid, and late game become good, kind of dangerous. Anyway, solid. 4 mana, 5/4, the Royal Guard Paladin minion. Taunt. Loot, summon a 1/1 Silver Hand recruit. Alright, sort of like a Violet Teacher, but revolves around trading for your opponent's minions and then getting 3 dudes. If you have board control, which is currently quite plausible as a paladin, given cards like Knife, Juggler, Muster for Battle, you can put Zombie Chow in there if you really need the early game. So then being able to play this on turn 4 and just kind of trade away your field, get more value out of that, does seem pretty solid. A 5/4 taunt that maybe summons a 1/1 token, that's pretty good. That's like playing a 4 mana 6/5, which is good statistically. Any more than that, and it's just icing on the cake. So yeah, this would be quite solid as well. Possibly overpowered. Quite likely overpowered. Could bring back cards like Quartermaster if you just make too many cards that just give Silver Hand recruits on the board. Kind of have to be careful about that. Oh wait, but Quartermaster won't be making a comeback because standard mode. Oh well, rip. Okay, Defender of Northrend. That is some golden armor, bro. 5 mana, 3/4. Give adjacent minions +1 health as a loot mechanic. That's interesting. So, it's sort of like having a Defender of Argus. Hey, let's say you have 2 minions on the board. They trade into a couple of weaker enemy minions. The enemy minions die. Defender of Northrend gives the adjacent minions +1/+1 each, twice. So that kind of makes this like a 5 mana 3/8 in that ideal circumstance. Seems pretty meh. I think I'd take Defender of Argus over this. I mean, especially because Defender of Argus also gives taunts, has no requirements, and is 1 mana less. This card just seems inferior, especially for a class-specific card. Prodigy of Medivh, 2 mana Mage Minion. 2/1, add a copy of this minion to your hand as a loot mechanic. Okay, yeah, I could see this being quite solid in a control deck. So your opponent's playing slow, you use Fire Blast to ping off some of their minions, but while you're doing that, you play Prodigy of Medivh, you get a new Prodigy of Medivh. no matter how many prodigies they kill, basically, the mage is going to get lots of free card value. Kind of a downside, it does cost 2 mana, but that's probably necessary for balance reasons. So it's a slow card for sure. It's kind of like playing Echo of Medivh in your deck, hence obviously why it's a of Medivh card. I don't know, would this card even be necessary? In some situations, it'd feel like maybe just playing a big card would be better, or just play Echo. I mean, there's only so much value you really need to get. Mage as a deck, and I say this by personal experience, by playing a lot of Control Mage, can definitely stuff in a ridiculous amount of value into their deck. Things like Duplicate, Effigy, Echo of Medivh. Theoretically, and it's not a good idea, but theoretically you can just build a deck that can basically outcard a Control Warrior or something like that already. So is this card really even necessary? Well, I keep forgetting, this would be like a standard set. And standard, I think Echo of Medivh is also going out the window, and that makes me sad because that's a really fun card. So could this replace Echo of Medivh? I guess so. Yeah, you might run one copy in your deck. Where this card would be pretty nice is if you're low on cards, you play this, you Flame Strike, you get 4 more of these to your hand, and then basically you'd pretty much have infinite gnomes. Unless you really mess up, you just play the gnomes when you're going to kill an opponent's minion, and then you just get more gnomes. So that could be kind of ridiculous, actually. So yeah, solid minion. Would be interesting now to see how it would actually play out in reality. The weakness of a deck like this would be basically Burst would still kill you. It's not like these are 2/1 taunts. If these were taunt minions, that might be OP. Then again, maybe it would be necessary to make it viable. Who knows? It would be kind of one of those things you'd really have to test out. Really crazy off-the-wall card. Okay, Little Arcanist. 4 mana, 2/6. Loot, gain +1 spell damage. So kind of similar to the... shoot, what's it even called? 4 mana, 3/5, Inspire, gain +1 spell damage. I forget what the dude's called because he's never played. But instead of Inspire, it's a loot mechanic. So more or less kind of the same card. Would this be any better? Is it easier to use a hero power, to afford to use a hero power and still maintain board control, than it is to trade into enemy minions and gain +1 spell damage? I would say it's probably easier for loot to proc. So let's say that you can consistently make it a 2/6 +1 spell damage. Then it would just basically be a slightly better Frozen Snowball, which I think personally as a card is slightly underrated. It's not terrible. No one plays it. I experimented with it a bit. I could see this card being maybe a one-off in a deck, especially if you can reliably get it to +2 spell damage. That might make it good enough. If like you can average it at 1.5 spell damage, that's borderline good enough. Okay, fair enough. Okay, 3 mana, 3/3, the Sharpshooter for Hunters. Loot, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. So this is like a Smork card that encourages you to trade, sort of. Or it encourages you to have a Knife Juggler on the field, in which case, if you got some sick Knife Juggler procs, killed off his Haunted Creeper or something like that, would just be ridiculous. You could play this with cards like Unleash the Hounds, and that would be pretty good as well. This card might be too good, almost. I feel like you could reliably get 4 damage off of it, on top of being a 3/3. And Kill Command is 4 damage, though it can be 5 damage against a minion, rather than the face. You have that option. I think this card might be slightly overpowered. I mean, given the current context of the game, who knows what things will be like when the next expansion set comes out. But this feels very strong to me. In both mid-range and Face Hunter, I think I would play this in Face Hunter as well. Expert Sniper. 1/1 for 1 mana, loot, gain, stealth. The problem with cards that have sort of powerful effects, but really low stats is, like, for instance, the Stealthy Knight, or Secret Knight, whatever he's called, Quiet Knight, is that you really need cards that can kind of buff it up for it to be nice. I mean, the Silent Knight is kind of okay because it has a Divine Shield, and a Divine Shield that you can't remove and is basically guaranteed going to get some value is kind of nice. But this is like, so what? It's a 1-mana minion that's going to keep poking the opponent's face, and the opponent can't really do anything about it. Just bleh. At those stats, it needs to be a 2-1. I think it really does need to be a 2-1. And even then, I don't know if I would run it. Your opponent's just going to find a way to remove it anyway. It's not like stealth minions are invincible. Arcane Missiles. Arcane Explosion, though, that's not really run. Swipe. Swipe would definitely wreck this card. What else? Consecration. Stuff like that. In most decks, especially in Constructed, are going to have a way to kind of remove this. 1 damage is almost irrelevant. I'd rather play a Lepernome, so this card's just not good enough. I'd rather play a Web Spinner. Yeah, it's just a very mediocre card. Now, if it was either a 2-1 or Loot gains Stealth and +1 attack, that would kind of not make sense because you'd gain the attack, and then if you attack that turn, you would lose the Stealth. But anyway, this card's not viable as a 1-1. Just not even close. Needs to be a 2-1 at least. Weeping Willow. 2 mana, 1/3 taunt, loot, summon a 1/1 sapling. Alright, that is pretty interesting. The fact you're kind of putting a dude summoner effect on a 2 mana minion really has the potential to be crazy powerful. If you already have board control, you play this, maybe you swipe on top of that. It's almost like having a Violet Teacher. Given the stats, not great for 2 mana, and Violet Teacher does have fine stats, 3/5 is okay. Yeah, I think this is slightly on the strong side, but maybe that's okay. I mean, we all know Druid's going to get hit really hard when the new expansion set in Standard Mode comes around, because Blizzard doesn't want to see Savage Roar Force of Nature be the combo for all eternity. So maybe they would need more options like this. Maybe not super OP, but definitely a solid choice. Could be really good. Oh, if only you could play this and then Poison Seeds, but it doesn't work like that, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, solid card. Okay, Fatal Druid, and this may actually be the last card. I'll go back to the start to double check. 4 mana, 4/4. Loot, give your hero +1 attack this turn, and it also happens to be a beast. Not a terrible idea, but the problem is you're competing with Savage Combatant, which I think was a TGT card actually, so it's not cycling out. Savage Combatant, Inspire, gain +2 attack, and your opponent's minions don't have to die or anything like that. Plus, the Savage Combatant has 1 more attack. I think this card's just inferior to Savage Combatant, and the problem is Savage Combatant is already kind of a borderline viable card. Yeah, it's run in some Druid decks. It doesn't make the cut in every single one like a Piloted Shredder or Druid of the Claw would. This card would fall below the power curve, so maybe you'd pick it up in Arena and it would be okay. If it was +1 attack permanently or something like that, that would be interesting. I was just thinking like, oh, did I misread it? Is that what it does? No, it's just this turn. So this card's just not good enough, but not too bad of an idea. Okay, so let's see, did we miss any? Yeah, we did, actually. So let's go through them. Hopefully I didn't lose too many people there. So the Tinkerer's Pet. 2 mana, 1/1, neutral minion, summon a Tinkerer's Pet when this minion dies. So I guess the idea is pretty much you Flame Strike your opponent's field, and you get this immediately on the field. So it's kind of like the Echo of Medivh kind of guy, except instead of going to your hand as a 2 mana 2/1, it goes to the field as a 2 mana 1/1. So it's like 9 mana Flame Strike, clear your opponent's board, get 3 or 4 1/1s on the board for 2 cards. It could be okay, but I don't think it's really good enough to be playable. Unless there's some crazy mech synergy that would come out in the future, it's pretty meh. And Cole specifically told me about this one, that it's not meant to bring back mech synergy or anything like that. So just judging it as a 1/1 that you can get clones of by destroying your opponent's minions, it's pretty iffy. It's like a bad Grim Patron, and Grim Patron is a solid deck still, but it's not like the end of the world. And it's not like these are removable by anything. Grim Patron, you need 3 damage. Big difference there. The Stompy Kodo. So 5 mana, 4/5 beast. Loot gain +1/+1. So this is basically a bad minion that has the potential to become good, and on average would probably be a 5 mana 5/6, which is fairly solid. I mean, 5/6. The Pit Fighter is considered a really good arena card, and never played in Constructed, though there were times where I was considering trying it out, but I guess it just didn't make the cut overall. In some cases, it can be a 5 mana 6/7? Yeah, 5 mana 6/7, in which case it would be quite good. Get more than that, and it could be BGH'd. But honestly, how often are you really going to kill 3 minions with this on the board? Well, considering on the following turn you can actually use this minion to make the trades itself, maybe this card is a little stronger than I was initially giving it credit for. If you have the situation where this card is good, where it basically becomes a 5/6 or 6/7 on the board, it's an immediate threat, it needs to be removed. For 5 mana, is that too unreasonable? Maybe it is a little strong. So maybe its base stats could be lowered a little bit more, like a 4/4, or maybe it could be made 6 mana. I feel like at 6 mana, 4/5 that gains extra stats would be about on par with Cannon Bloodhoof, which seems pretty fair to me. It's a 5 mana 4/5. Could be too strong. Could also be basically right where it needs to be a option, but not game breaking. And well, silence doesn't work against it too greatly because it would just become a 4/5 again. So it's somewhere between average and strong. New Murloc Splasher, 2 mana 3/1. Each player draws a card. Okay, so you're giving mill rogues more options. That is really dangerous. A 3 mana 3/1. Okay, so it has the potential to make some decent trades. I think a 3/1 might be better stats than a 2/2. In some cases, yeah. So, making both people draw 1 more card faster. Probably would only make it into mill decks. Would be good in mill decks. Would this, combined with everything else that's available to Rogue, or even Druid, push those cards to be, those decks to be too good? Maybe. I kind of feel like maybe not. You could play this. You could also play, say, Dancing Swords as a 3 mana 4/4, though not after Naxxramas is gone. And that forces your opponent to draw a card. That card wasn't like a guaranteed include in mill decks, so I don't think this one really would be either, but it's interesting. Maybe more in like an aggro Murloc deck, that could be a thing. 3 damage is quite solid. That's true. Okay, next card. Siege Mammoth. Wow, okay, that's a pretty big card. 6 mana 5/7. Loot gain +2 attack. Immune when attacking minions with 3 or less attack. So it's like the perfect answer to my Axna, because it doesn't take damage. Oh wait, no, what am I talking about? It just gains +2 attack. Oh wait, no, it does gain immunity. Yeah, okay. When you combine both of those effects, that's kind of crazy, actually. So this could quickly become a 7/7 for 6 mana, which isn't actually that crazy, but a 7/7 that can repeatedly stomp on little guys. But is that even relevant? Because the only decks that are little guys aren't going to be attacking this anyway. It doesn't have taunt. It costs 6 mana to play. If you were playing it in a big deck, like maybe if it was against Priest, which has a lot of 3 or less attack minions, then it would be quite tough to deal with, unless they just used Shadow Word Death. And then you're paying 6 mana for something that just kind of dies. But on the other hand, if you do have enough enemy minions die while this guy's out on the field, the attack can become quite ridiculous. I feel like this would be a good arena card. It would definitely be a good arena card, but is it good enough to play in Constructed? Tough call. If you're playing a deck that has other BGH targets, maybe. Okay, next up, Raider Bork. Your loots trigger twice. 6 mana, 3/6. Basically in the same vein as basically Brand Bronzebeard or Baron Rivendare. Could get quite ridiculous. I mean, so could Baron Rivendare, but Baron Rivendare was never played. Is loot as a mechanic good enough to justify this? I'm kind of leaning no, and the reason for that is Brand Bronzebeard's good because you can get the effect immediately in any situation as long as you have Brand Bronzebeard plus your Battlecry minion in your hand at the same time, which isn't that hard to do. Raider Bork requires you to basically have a field to play Raider Bork, to also be able to play the loot minion in the same turn, get value off of that loot effect, and getting the value once isn't good enough because, I mean, he's only a 3/6. You'd need probably at least 2 loot effect procs for this to even be worth it at his current power level, and yeah, I just don't see that happening in most cases. If you have the perfect board situation where you can already get so many loot procs without losing your guys, then at that point you've already won without Raider Bork anyway, so just not quite good enough, I think. If he was a 6 mana 5/6, that might be more reasonable, because I don't think his special effect is that powerful. It's not powerful enough to justify it as a 3/6. Okay, Nazjatar Sorcerer. 5 mana, 5/2, loot, draw a card. Sort of like a Cult Master, but 1 more mana. Has 1 more attack, but the attack's pretty much irrelevant. So, just like a 5 mana Cult Master. Cult Master that also works if you trade in spells from your hands. It's okay. I'm not sure if it's better than Cult Master. I guess if you're at like turn 8 or 9, you could play this in a Fireball, but I feel like there are better ways for decks to draw cards. Like, if you're really playing that slow of a deck, just Acolyte of Pain. If you're playing a minion-based deck, might as well just play Cult Master to begin with. Then your opponent's minions don't even have to die necessarily. Because remember, for the loot effect to proc, your opponent's minions have to die, each of them. Sometimes, in most cases even, it's way easier to just trade in 3 1/1 Silverhand recruits than it is to take out a board of like a Sludge Belcher, a Lotheb, and an Emperor Thaurissan. That would be a horrible board for a Cult Master, just FYI. So, this card, it's interesting, but it would just basically go in the collection and never see play. Especially with that stat line. Okay, Mechano Hog Rider. Surprisingly not a mech. 4 mana, 3/2, loot, gain charge. 4 mana minion that has charge under special conditions? Oh, this might be one of the worst cards in the set. Why wouldn't you just play Wolf Rider? Or why wouldn't you just play, the Silverhand Rider, or whatever his name is? Why wouldn't you just play, the Armored Warhorse? I feel like taking the 50-50 on that is probably... I mean, the 50-50 on a 5/3 charger is probably better than a 3/2 that you can often get the charge with. If this to be good, I think it would have to be a 5-attack minion. Who gives a crap about a 4-mana minion that does 3 damage? That's just not worth it. Okay, and I believe that's it. So, overall, it's a very interesting mechanic. I kind of feel like it's a little bit too gimmicky. Some of the cards are really good. For instance, the Echo guy. Let's go back to him for a second. Oh, another card that was really good, Scrollgatherer. But those cards are mostly good, just because the effects that they grant are pretty solid, and you can likely get it once, and if you get it procced once, it becomes a decent card or a good card. But the ones that really require you to get 3 or 4 loot procs, it's just asking too much, and I think you're kind of living in a fantasy world if you're going for that. I mean, if you already have board control, maybe you do an equality and then you play your loot card, yeah, you can get some value off of it. But most of these cards, just going to kind of not be played. And the ones that do get played aren't going to be played in like a synergy loot deck. They're going to be played just because it's overpowered. Like Sharpshooter gets to do 4 damage for free and it's a 3/3. That's pretty solid. But then you have other ones like Expert Sniper, which are a complete joke. And the ones that you do play, you just play because overall they're just really strong cards. Would the loot mechanic be good for the game? Yeah, I could see Blizzard adding a mechanic like this into the game overall. It might be pretty good. Who knows what they're actually going to use as the next kind of gimmick for the new expansion set later this spring. But we'll have to see. It could be something like loot for sure. So overall, interesting card set. Definitely fun to take a look at them. So thank you very much for that, Cold. I've been Dark Skeleton. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.